Lady, what is that?
It's time to get the inside scoop on the Utes. This is your Utes Daily Update with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Pretty much what we saw at the beginning. Not a lot of separation. I would say if there has been separation, Mekhi Bernard, Mike Mitchell, and Jalen Glover are the first three, not necessarily in that order. But all three of those guys are doing a nice job. Then you got Hunter Andrews, Charlie Vincent, Dejon Stanley. They're in that next group of three. It's those six guys that are getting the reps.
I mean, that's a good problem to have, right? 6 deep at any position.
This is going to be a good topic to talk to Steve Bartle about because is this like quarterback when you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none? If you have 6 running backs, do you have none? Or is somebody going to emerge here? Is there somebody who's going to have a big season at the running back position? Or is this going to be kind of like the last couple years where you didn't have that 1,000-yard? I mean, you look back and they've been spoiled with Tavion Thomas. And before that, obviously, Zach Moss, Ty Jordan with that, it was brief, but just an amazing season in 2020 in the COVID-shortened year. But then you go back to Zach Moss and then obviously Devontae Booker. They've just been spoiled with these big-time 1,000-yard backs that end up in the NFL. What about this year? And does that matter this year with all the talent they have at other positions?
The answer is more complicated than you might think. BYU, what'd they say? They might travel 8 tight ends? And then Utah's going to travel 6 or 7. We got 15 tight ends traveling to different games across the state.
You never have too many tight ends.
Well, no, it is a position you can benefit from it. Come on. Joining us on the program right now, he is our Ute Insider, KSLSports.com. Steve Bartle on the program, as usual, here with us, giving us an update on camp. Our program brought to you by G2G Bars. All natural ingredients and no preservatives make the G2G Bar perfect for anybody who needs a quick, tasty, and nutritious boost. Let's jump in right here with Steve. It's The Cut. Let's jump in right now.
It's time for the biggest story of the day. This is what made the cut with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
All right, this portion of the show brought to you by an incredible selection of Kia, Subaru, Jeep, Dodge, Ram, or Chevy. It's the Doug Smith dealerships in American Fork and Spanish Fork. Great service starts with know-how. Nobody knows like Doug. And nobody knows the Utes like Steve Bartle. Steve, thanks for being on the program again, man. Is it really a plethora of tight ends that the Utes are dealing with? And really, could all of them be that beneficial to the roster, too?
Man, I'm fascinated by this tight end room because, like you guys said, there's a plethora of them. They have six guys that I think can see the field this fall and see the field like pretty consistently, pretty regularly. Like that's the thing that is so unique about this group is, they just have guys. You have a proven veteran in Brant Keithy. You've got a guy that's been in the program now multiple years who's Kyle Whittingham said on Monday has been the most consistent tight end in camp so far, and Miki Sugaturanga. And then you've got all these other guys, Carson Ryan, Landon King, Dallin Bentley, and this other guy now, Caleb Lohner, who every time we talk to somebody, like his name pops up, like offense or defense, coach or player, they always find a way to mention Caleb Lohner. And so it's just, it's unique. And when you actually look at the strengths and what each of these guys bring to the field, they all kind of complement each other really well. And certain strengths work well with others. And so it's just, it's fascinating how they're going to utilize all of these tight ends. I'm pretty positive we are going to see 14 personnel this season with 4 tight ends on the field at one time. And we'll probably see it just, as they march down the field and that sort of thing. Like, so it's not going to be a red zone strictly type person. Like we could see it they're just out there, 14 personnel, 4 tight ends, and they can line them up in line. They can line them up out wide. And so in this tight end room, it is going to be the biggest difference maker for Utah this season because of the ability in the room and the depth that they have and the versatility that they have with these guys.
That's awesome, Steve. It's great for Utah and great for all those tight ends, but there's only so many plays. There's only so many times they're going to throw the football. How do they keep all these guys happy? How do they make this work? Plus, we haven't even talked about the receivers. We haven't even talked about the run game either. How do they keep everybody here happy? How do they get the most out of the talent they have on this roster? on the offensive side at these skill positions.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating storyline to follow this fall because they haven't had this amount of guys at tight end or at wide receiver, right? Like I've shared this multiple times over the last couple of weeks, but it wasn't too long ago, 2018, 2019, where you're talking about 3 or 4 guys in the passing game between the wide receiver and tight end rooms alone, like combined as legitimate options. And now we're talking about, 3 in the wide receiver room, 3 in the tight end room, potentially more, a couple breakout guys. And so, yeah, there are going to be a lot of mouths to feed. And, part of it is simply that's going to raise the level of competition. Guys have to make plays. They have to capitalize on their opportunities. That's always going to be the biggest priority at Utah. You got to earn your keep. But I do think part of it is going to be managing who gets however many targets, who they try to game plan for, and that sort of thing each and every week. Every matchup is going to provide unique opportunities to get somebody involved. It's going to provide a unique matchup. It's going to, provide a certain look that they can exploit. And Andy Ludwig and that coaching staff, they do a great job of scouting the opponents and putting together game plans and that sort of thing. And so that's going to be an important factor as well. So, it's going to be interesting. There are a lot of mouths to feed. And like I said, we haven't even really started to talk about the wide receiver or running back rooms. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, the wideouts are always intriguing every year because we wonder if that talent will get utilized, to the extent that they should. But the running back room is interesting because it's got a lot of talent in it, and yet we don't necessarily see who that 1, 2, 3, 4 is going to be. I think that Mekhi Bernard, as the veteran and the guy who has run the ball and caught the ball a lot out of the backfield, that's a massive piece to that. And I couldn't see him necessarily being anything other than RB1. Maybe you disagree, but one of those interesting names. And Jalen Glover, we know his name, but I think it's Mike Mitchell is one of those guys that we're looking at and we're going, hey, this guy kind of is getting talked about a lot. And obviously, it's his redshirt freshman year. He's a big body. What does he bring to the table, and how much does Coach Whittingham love him and Andy Ludwig like what he brings to the table? Because it sounds like they really like what he's doing.
Well, I'll tell you, I really like Mike Mitchell. Getting to talk with him and listen to him and just hear from him this week. At our media availability on Monday, man, it was refreshing to hear him talk about his offseason, his mindset, his desire to be RB1 at Utah. Like, he's not just here to contribute. Like, he wants to be the guy. And I think that is you need that. You want that in a running back, right? You want a guy to have that desire to be a bell cow type of guy, to be a ball dominant type of guy. But at the same time, he also knows that, look, Mekhi Bernard has been here a long time. He's contributed a lot to the success of this program. Jalen Glover's been here a couple years. He's helped Utah along the way as well, and he knows that those guys are the veterans. But I think with Mitchell, outside of his mindset, you love the fact that he's 6 foot, he's 217 pounds. Based on what I've heard, man, he runs hard. He runs physical, and that's the sort of running back that always seems to find success at Utah and under Kyle Whittingham specifically. So, we've seen it over the last couple of years, right? Utah coming out of fall camp, there's not really that bell cow guy, the clearly defined RB1. But then, we get into the season, you start handing the ball off to these guys, and suddenly somebody makes a couple plays. And then, you start to feed them the rock a little bit more consistently. And then by, mid-season, we're talking about a guy that's established himself as the guy. And I think Mitchell absolutely has that sort of potential. And he's got a game that really works well with the other 2 backs in Bernard and Glover, who are more of those athletic, change of pace type guys that can complement a real power runner. So I think it's shaping up well. I think this is kind of an ideal situation for Utah at the running back spot. Obviously, you got to keep him healthy and keep him fresh. But I really like Mitchell's potential this season.
It's hard to imagine a Kyle Whittingham team really throwing the football a lot. But it feels like, to me, Steve, that's their strength on offense right now. With what you just talked about, the running back room, it's good. But you got all these tight ends and you got these receivers, and Cam Rising is back, and Brent Keithy's a preseason All-American. Feels like the strength of this offense could be in the pass game. Could we see Utah throw the ball more than they've ever thrown it before? Or do you think that still stays with Kyle's mantra without run the ball first? And how do you see that developing? Could we see a different Utah offense this year as far as run-pass distribution?
Yeah, I think there's definitely room for that to be the case this season. Obviously, we got to get into the games and we got to see how they play out, right? If Utah's up comfortably, in the third and fourth quarter, they're not going to continue to throw the ball around a lot, right? So that's always a big factor. But when we're not talking about garbage time type of offense, right? When we're talking about you're in the thick of it. Like I do think, the strengths of this offense, they point to the passing game. And I think when Utah knows what they have in Cam Rising, they know what he's accomplished. They know what he's capable of. And I think there's been, a mindset, a goal, this offseason of bringing in as much talent as possible to surround Cam Rising with those options, to allow him to be that sort of quarterback, right? And I think it says a lot of Cam Rising that, Kyle Whittingham, Andy Ludwig, that they trust him enough to potentially be a pass-heavy offense. And I do think we'll see the ball thrown around, quite a bit more. I think there's absolutely a benefit to it as well, right? You throw the ball around, you open up the run game. You get the run game going, suddenly, defenses have to counter and bring somebody else in the box. And then it's just this boxing match back and forth. And I think that can be a real advantage for Utah this year. So I think, there's a lot of things going into it, but I do think Utah can certainly be a team, at the end of the season that we look at that run-pass ratio and it's tilted in favor of the passing game this season. I think there's a real possibility, a real chance, a real good chance at that being the case this season.
You have the projected depth chart up at KSLSports.com. People should go check that out. I mean, again, you want to get the download on the Utes while it's happening. You get it from Steve because it's phenomenal stuff. But on top of it, there's a lot of names you recognize. There's a lot of names that you go, of course. But what are some of the guys when you're typing this article up and you went, you know what? This is a name that you've started to really like, or that you notice that the coaches are liking. Is there somebody on that depth chart, not even necessarily as a starter, but maybe somebody sneaking in that second unit even, that could be a surprise name, or somebody that you fans don't necessarily know right now?
Yeah, I think that's always a fun part of the season, is getting into these games and seeing who emerges. Right, Dalton Kincaid was that a couple years ago, where he burst on the scene game one. I think he had 2 tutties and 76 yards against Weber State in 2021, and so who's going to be that next guy? I think there's a couple guys that come to mind. First, Dijon Stanley at that running back spot. Here we are talking about Bernard and Glover and Mitchell emerging as a trio, but I think Stanley has this sort of unique skill set and athleticism with his speed that you kind of have to find ways to manufacture ways to get him some touches, because his speed is just such an advantage. So I would look at Stanley as being a guy that could potentially be on that surprise breakout list. Another guy I think has, from what I've heard, has had a good camp so far has been Micah Pittman at receiver. He didn't get off to a great start last year. We know the name, but I think after what happened last season, I think a lot of people are just kind of wondering what's going on with him. And I think he's had a good camp and could potentially be have a much better season this year. Dallin Bentley, I think, is going to be a name that will surprise a lot of people, seeing him listed as a starter at that wide tight end spot, just considering the depth. But Dallin Bentley, he's a guy that's legit 6'5", almost 6'6". He's 255, 260 pounds. He grew up a receiver at Taylorsville. Then he had this crazy growth spurt from his junior, senior year, He grew like 8 inches, I think. He goes to Snow College, and he's learning the tight end position, and after a year there, he looked really good, and he's still got this athleticism that just pops. And I think that was what attracted Utah to him the most, was he's got these clips of doing these crazy athletic feats and really impressive stuff. So I think Dallin Bentley is going to be a guy that surprises people. Along the offensive line, Tanoa Togiai is going to be, I think, a good contributor at left guard. And then defense, just a couple quick names. Trey Reynolds, I think, is going to provide a real physical presence at that linebacker room. If you get him, squared up against a really run-heavy team, he's going to have his way. He's going to win a lot of those matchups and really plug gaps. He loves the game. He loves to be physical. So I look at those guys primarily as those kind of surprise breakout type of guys.
We chatted with Alakai, oh my goodness, Gilman from Stanford. And that's a guy too that comes in, and he came in from the portal. What kind of promises he have? Where's he going to be at on this list?
Yeah, I think So we've talked a lot about that safety position with names Teo Johnson and Nate Ritchie primarily, but I think Alakai Gilman is going to be a guy that forces his way onto the field. He just he got here for spring ball, and so he got those few weeks in to kind of get familiar with the system and get familiar with the scheme and how Morgan Skelly coaches that room. And he's come into fall camp now with that under his belt, with a few extra months of prep. And he's looked great in camp. It's allowed him to kind of settle in and play more instinctually. And this is a guy that, coming out of high school, even you go back and read some of the scouting reports on him as a recruit, raved about his instincts and just his ability to make plays. I think that's, he can be a sort of versatile safety to complement Nate Ritchie and Teo Johnson. He can line up, deep over the top and help you there. He can line up at nickel. He can line up at strong safety. So he's kind of this nice little chess piece to have at that safety room. I think he's going to be a guy that finds a few different ways to help contribute to this defense this season.
As we're going through this list and I'm looking over your depth chart, it's pretty obvious this Utah team is really loaded with talent. They're stacked at every position. But is there any place where you look at, Steve, if you're being really, really objective and you say, you know what, I'm not sure. I don't know. I got to see on the field. I'm not sure about this. This could be a weak spot for this team. What is that?
There's two that come to mind, and first it's the cornerback room. A lot of confidence in Zemiah Vaughn, and a lot of optimism and confidence even in Smith Snowden being a breakout guy. Kenan Johnson is a guy that have heard a lot of really good things about going back to spring ball and now into fall camp. When we were in spring ball watching practices, we watched him get a couple interceptions and make some really impressive plays to make those interceptions. And it sounds like that's a thing that's continued into fall camp. But, will that continue into the season? I think Utah absolutely needs that, from those three. Those three have to be guys that they can count on a week in, week out basis. So that's one group, because after that, the depth is a bit of a question mark. They're young, they're inexperienced behind those guys. There's talent in that room behind them, but the inexperience is something that is certainly noticeable. So you're going to want Smith and Zemiah and Kenan to be guys and to be reliable. And then the other group is the defensive end room, which may surprise people, just considering how Whittingham has talked about that. That's a group that's 7 or 8 deep, and they've definitely got a lot of bodies there and a lot of good athletes. Connor O'Toole has been a guy that's been in that room now a couple of years. Van Fillinger has been a mainstay in that starting lineup for the last few years as well. But having to replace Jonah Ellis with his production and just having that presence on the defensive line was a significant thing for Utah. It was a significant advantage. And so, do they have somebody? Can Connor O'Toole be that guy this season? I'm optimistic that he can, but that's just, we've got to see it. So that defensive end room, like I said, they've got a lot of bodies, but a lot of guys that are coming in. Paul Fitzgerald from Utah State, John Henry Daly from BYU.
Mm-hmm.
Are they ready to make that transition, to make that jump, from where they were and that sort of thing to contribute at Utah this season? We'll see. And those are just some of the questions that I have at that defensive end room.
Steve Bartle, Ute Insider, KSLSports.com. Go to the website right now. There's a full-on, there's a whole, if you go to the KSL Sports and KSLSports.com, there is a college sports tab. You click on Utes, and you're going to have about 100 articles you're going to need to catch up on with Steve, because he's been deep in it, and we've been enjoying every bit of it. Man, so what's the rest of the fall look like? Because they're going to be, another scrimmage this weekend probably, and then is it 10 days out from their first game that they actually get into actual game planning for SUU?
Yeah, so I think they had a scrimmage today, actually, a scrimmage at 10. That was their second scrimmage this morning. So that's it for this week. But then I think they've got a few more days, and I do think you're right. I think they get into in-season practice mode at some point next week. Tomorrow we get to head up to Utah and talk to the assistant coaches tomorrow. So that'll be something to keep your eye on, looking for content and that sort of stuff. So we'll get that tomorrow. We'll hear from coaches and kind of pick their brains on how the scrimmage went today and that sort of stuff. So be on the lookout for all that.
It's unlikely that if you're a Ute fan, you don't already follow Steve on the social medias. But if you don't, give him a follow. And frankly, everybody out there, if you're one of those people that likes to just get all the full download, just so you kind of, even if it's a know thine enemy type situation.
Even a BYU fan that wants to hate.
Absolutely.
Steve's got
you covered with the hate. If you want to hate somebody, no, you can't hate Steve, man.
I'm not saying hate Steve. That's not what I'm saying. We all love Steve.
Oh my goodness, we'll take all the clicks. We don't care who you are. We'll take your clicks. All right, Steve Bartle, Ute Insider, KSLSports.com. Steve, we'll chat with you again. We're looking forward to tomorrow's media as well, and we'll dive in with that also.
Sounds good. Appreciate you, fellas.
There you go,
Steve
Bartle,
Steve.
buddy.
That's great info. If you're a Utah fan and you don't feel well nourished after that, I mean, like, he got the download on camp where the depth chart is.
Give me your sixth tight end.
The strengths, the weaknesses. I mean, did he say 14 personnel?
That's fun.
What?
Just go like
just all your tight ends.
Hey, if they said they had 6, prove it. Go 16 personnel.
Give me all your tight ends.
Give me. There's no.
Give me all the bacon and tight ends that you have.
There are no other. Take all the wideouts off the field. Make a couple of those tackles tight ends too. Why not? My goodness. All right, we'll take a break. We've got more to go around the corner. Yeah, follow Steve, and if you don't already, just get those alerts every time he writes something up. Have it hit your inbox. Okay, we'll come back. We've got more to go around the corner. Stay right here, 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone.